Hello, this is Unsung with GameLeap, and in today's video, we're going to be giving you a guide on mage itemization in Season 14. Comment down below what you think of Season 14 when it drops. I'm very curious to hear all your opinions. Just a quick reminder, if you want to learn any mage champion, then head on over to GameLeap.com where we have the best tips and tricks videos to get you onto the Rift as soon as possible. You won't have to spend hours in practice tool learning hidden mechanics. Instead, you could just listen to me tell you exactly what you need to be doing. See you on the website. As I'm sure that you know, the mage itemization changes are one of the highlights of Season 14 and one of the most requested item reworks that we've ever had. Season 13 mage itemization is unreasonably bland. There's nothing that really stands out about these items, and they all do the same thing. They're mostly uninteresting balls of stats. A great example of this would be Liandry's Anguish. This mythic is geared towards shredding tanks, but it does just as much damage to squishy champions as Luden's. This means that there are a few discerning differences between Luden's and Liandry's. Luden's is slightly better at dealing damage upfront and bursting certain targets down, but Liandry's, once our opponent has any source of MR or any bonus HP whatsoever, or they're allowed to tick for an extended period of time, will always outdamage Luden's. This means no matter what choice we make, the itemization is going to have the same effect. It will just deal increased damage. The decisions that we're going to be making using the Season 14 items are already vastly different than what we currently have. There are 4 starting items that we want to focus on today, with each one of them having a unique effect that will define our gameplay. Let's go ahead and start with our first item, which is going to be Luden's Companion. Unlike Luden's Tempest, Luden's Companion has no refund mechanic, and it doesn't wait for you to have the full cooldown refreshed before you're actually able to use the passive. Instead, you gain a shot charge every few seconds, and then whenever you hit an ability on somebody, it consumes all available shot charges to deal additional magic damage right off the bat. If there's an additional enemy near your primary target, then that one shot charge will splash that enemy as well, dealing damage to them. What really separates this item from Luden's is that if there is no enemy nearby, then instead the shot charges are reconsumed, dealing bonus damage to that one single target. Instead of being a general splash of extra AoE damage, this is a true burst item now. And the stat line is amazing as a one item spike. 90 AP, 600 mana, and 20 ability haste paired with that passive makes this a very attractive item for most burst mages. If your champion is more reliant on their basic abilities than they are on their ultimate, then this is the first item that we want to be buying. I would recommend buying this item on champions like Syndra, Orianna, and the like. Now, our next new item is for those champions that are more reliant on their ultimate than they are on their basic abilities. Malignance has an impressive stat line with 80 ability power, 600 mana, and also 20 ability haste, but with the added benefit of passively granting us ultimate ability haste. The stat line plus the ultimate ability haste makes this really shoot up in value on champions like Lissandra, especially with the CC that they have paired with it. This is only made significantly stronger by our additional passive that Malignance has. Our second passive is Hate Fog. Damaging a champion with your ultimate burns the ground beneath them, dealing magic damage and also reducing their magic resist. So let's think about Lissandra using Malignance for one moment. Not only do we get AP, not only do we get mana, we get ability haste as well, we also get ultimate ability haste on top of that, and whenever we cast our ultimate, it deals a massive amount of increased damage over time because of this Hate Fog passive. If your champion has a reliable source of crowd control and also has a good ultimate, then this is a fantastic item for you. Mages with heavy or reliable CC and a reliance on their ultimate are going to be building Malignance as a first item, whereas most champions who are more reliant on their basic abilities want to lean towards Luden's Companion. If you are playing a champion that doesn't really suit either of these items quite well, then we still have Rod of Ages and Archangel's Staff. They're essentially the same as they are in Season 13. Rod of Ages will still be a staple item on champions like Anivia, especially when paired with one of the new situational items that we're going to be talking about in just a moment. Archangel's Staff has been slightly changed, but we're still going to be building it in the same situations. If we're playing a mana-hungry champion that doesn't really benefit from these spell effects and we want to be a bit tankier, then Archangel's is going to be the way to go. So if you're a battle mage that wants to get up close like Swain or Anivia, then Rod of Ages is a great bet. If you're a champion that's going to be susceptible to dives, or you want to be very strong when the enemy team does eventually dive onto you, then we can go for Archangels. If we want to play a less damage-oriented Orianna and focus more on our utility aspects, then we can build it on her, or on a champion like Seraphine. Essentially, stay alive short range, Rod of Ages, stay alive long range, then Archangels. That concludes our itemization guide for the first 4 starting items. There is not a single mage in the game that will skip one of these 4 items as a first item power spike. Now, there are going to be a few exceptions to this rule. If you're playing a champion that does not have mana costs, such as Katarina, or you're playing something that simply has better synergy with other items, we can opt into first item Rocket Belt or even Storm Surge. These champions are going to be fringe cases and they're not directly classified as a mage, so understand that your champion's itemization might change if they're manaless. Mordekaiser, for example, will still want to go Rylai's into Riftmaker. Katarina can still go Nashor's Tooth into Rocket Belt. You get the idea. For almost all AP champions, there's going to be 3 main boot choices. We can either go Sorcerer's Shoes for increased damage, we can go Ionians if we're playing a summoner spell or ability haste reliant champion, something like Lissandra, or if the enemy team is playing a mage that counters us, we can go Mercury's Treads to ensure that we don't lose our lane too hard and that we're able to shrug off CC. Our third item slot is where things get interesting again. There will be a few champions in the game that will like to go Luden's Companion into Malignance as a 3 item spike, but if you're not one of these champions, then instead you'll want one of 3 items. Storm Surge is going to be public enemy number 1 for most of you League players out there. This item grants you 100 AP, 10 magic penetration, and also 5 movement speed. This by itself is a decent stat line, but it does get even better. Our first passive on this 2900 gold item is Storm Raider. Dealing 35% of a champion's maximum health within a short duration applies Squall and grants movement speed. Squall, our second passive, causes a lightning bolt to strike our enemy after a few seconds, dealing magic damage. If the target dies before the strike goes off, it fully detonates, dealing damage in a large area and granting bonus gold. Imagine Ludens, but turned up to 11, that also grants you a huge amount of movement speed with a great stat line, and that's basically what Storm Surge is. If you've been playing League at all in the last 2 seasons, I'm sure that you understand just how problematic phase rush mages can be. This used to be even worse when Storm Raider Surge was in the game. This item essentially grants us Storm Raiders as well as a mega electrocute that hits in an AoE. Just absolutely ridiculous when paired with its stat line. If any mage item in Season 14 gets nerfed immediately, it's going to be this one. I would highly recommend that you build this on basically every single champion. If, however, you're a champion that does not synergize super well with the movement speed or the extra damage, which is, few and far between, then we can opt into going Haunting Guise and then sitting on that. Haunting Guise is a great item for damage over time mages, things like Cassiopeia, Malzahar, and Anivia to some extent. For 1300 gold, we get 35 ability power, 200 health, and then the Madness passive. For each second in combat with enemy champions, deal increased damage. Damage over time champions have more effective uptime, essentially meaning that they're going to get more value out of this madness than essentially every other champion in the game. What makes this component so strong is that it's cheap for a decent amount of stats, so we can sit on it and not actually complete our full Leandries. Sitting on this opponent kind of gives us the best of both worlds. We have our 1-item spike, we have our boots underneath it, we have our percentage increased damage, and then we can go into something like Shadow Flame, which has also been reworked. So just to recap, our first 2 items are Storm Surge, which grants us movement speed and a super electrocute. Our next item is Leandries, mostly for the component, but we can complete the full item if the enemy team is running really tanky, or we just want to opt into a damage over time profile. And then our final option is going to be for those champions that really just want to one-rotate people as quickly as possible, and that's going to be Shadow Flame. Shadow Flame's new stat line is going to be 120 ability power and 12 magic penetration. There is no ability haste or defensive stats on this item whatsoever. Instead, most of our gold value on this item is going straight into the passive called Cinder Bloom. Magic damage and true damage critically strikes low health enemies. So if we're playing a champion like Syndra and we get all of our mana and ability haste needs off of our first item spike, we have our boots to give us more magic pen, and we buy a Shadow Flame, we can simply use our Q into E combo on a squishy, throw a W, and then toss our ultimate plus ignite. Every single one of those instances of the ultimate's damage and the ignite ticks will then critically strike, ensuring that we will 100% execute this opponent. This is an incredibly high risk, high reward item, but it does make sense when we talk about our next itemization option. If you want to just blow somebody up and remove them from the face of the planet playing a one-shot assassin or a one-rotation mage, then Shadow Flame is the best bet for that. There is no other item that even comes close to the sheer amount of damage that it grants. Storm Surge, in my opinion, is better because of the utility plus the damage that it grants, but Shadow Flame is great for just making one person miserable. If you're playing Lux and you have a Luden's Companion Sorcerer's Shoes and then a Shadow Flame, that one champion that you keep bullying over and over and over again is going to want to uninstall, I promise. If your champion doesn't directly synergize with any of these stats and instead you want to be a little bit more of a beefy frontline while also having ability haste, we can also opt into Cosmic Drive, which is a more ability haste and movement speed focused item, but I do highly believe that this item is going to be easily outshone by all the new options. Our 2 primary defensive items on most mages are going to be Zhonya's Hourglass and Banshee's Veil, and they share a very similar stat line. Both of these items have 120 AP, Veil has 50 MR, and then Zhonya's has 50 armor. Banshee's Veil, passive Annul, grants you a spell shield. It's the same as Live. It just has a different stat line. Zhonya's Hourglass also has no stopwatch component any longer, making the build path for this kind of awkward actually. Our build path now is going to be Needlessly Large Rod directly into Seeker's Arm Guard. Stopwatch is completely gone, so the build path is awkward to unlock that super powerful active that everybody knows and hates. In my opinion, Banshee's Veil seems way too strong, and then Hourglass does seem like it's on the weaker side, which will then bring back assassin picks. The new terrain changes also compound the issue of assassins being much stronger, as it's very easy to set up a dive on the enemy mid laner, but that's for another video. Essentially, building an Hourglass is going to really hurt our economy and reduce our damage heavily, whereas building a Veil is going to be way stronger defensively if we're against a magic damage dealer. Regardless of what style of champion you play, you will end up building one of these 2 defensive options in basically every single game. They're just super impactful, and the sheer reduction of ability haste across the board makes dodging or blocking one single spell that much more valuable. League is moving away from its Earthification just a little bit, and now every single champion in the game isn't going to be able to machine gun rapid fire high damage spells over and over and over again. Instead, you'll fire a spell, have a clear cooldown window, and then have to adjust your position accordingly. Once we get our defensive itemization out of the way, we now have a new penetration option. Void Staff is essentially the same. It grants us 80 AP and 40 magic pen which is quite high. The magic pen on this item is quite high, simply due to how strong the new MR items are. Force of Nature grants you a whopping 125 extra MR, which is just disgusting if we don't have the appropriate amount of percentage pen. This is going to be our anti-tank item. Crypt Bloom, on the other hand, has a different effect entirely. This item grants us 70 ability power, 30% magic penetration, and also 15 ability haste. There is a unique passive on this item called Life from Death. Whenever you get a takedown on an enemy champion within 3 seconds of damaging them, create a healing nova that can then heal allies. This is like a Fiora ultimate, but on a mage takedown. This is the item that you want to build when you're playing against squishies, or if you have a team that is squishy. Overkilling your champions is a real and easy thing for champions like Viger, so it's better to get some value out of killing them instead of just removing them from the map. Now, when you take down an opponent, you can also get the Storm Surge proc on top of a Crypt Bloom Blossom directly in the center of a team fight. This grants you much more impact as a mage, and it makes your spell effects that much more interesting. So now our penetration option isn't as blind as just go Void Staff whenever we need pen. Crypt Bloom is a viable and also situationally stronger alternative. Now, so far in this video, we've covered our one item spike, we've covered our boot choices, we've covered our situational item, our defensive option, and then our penetration item. How do we round out a mage build? That is quite simple: Rabadon's Death Cap. This item now grants you a flat 140 ability power and then increases your total AP by 35%. This is your capstone item and what you want to build when you have a massive lead, or if you want to just translate all the damage that you have into more damage. Raba, in my opinion, is going to be outshined by the sheer amount of passes that we have in the game, making it not so much a necessary third or fourth item like it is currently. Don't get me wrong, there is still going to be champions with massive AP ratios that will want a Rabadon's as a third or fourth item as a Zhonya's replacement. But for most mages, we'll want to be finishing this as a last or second to last item just because our utility and ability haste options are so far and few between. We really need to get those items out of the way in their early game where they're going to be the most impactful. Raba has to wait. Now, that entirely sums up our mage itemization options for Season 14. If you are a mage player, I'm really excited for you. There's going to be a lot of really cool builds circulating, and that's what makes League so fun. Anyways, this was Unsigned with Gamely. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys in the next video.